Special segment tonight, color lines, the prominent place of blacks in America's military forces. Military services now are the most colorblind segment of society. But as NBC's Fred Francis reports in this first installment of a three-part series, there is concern the best days for blacks in the military may now be over.
Everybody see that?
Yes, Mr. Sergeant.
Okay,
In today's Army, a third of the sergeants are black. At the White House, a black general is helping to rebuild the National Security Council. Another black general is senior aviator of all the services. And for the first time in history, a military academy, West Point, has a black general in charge of training cadets. This is the story of the climb to the top by blacks in uniform, of hard-won equal opportunity unmatched in any sector of American life and largely unnoticed outside the Brotherhood of Arms. This is the story of that upward mobility and why most fear that their quiet progress is now threatened.
Many of us went off to war in World War II in a Jim Crow army.
Retired General Julius Becton remembers how so-called colored units were not permitted into battle if white troops were available. Blacks were considered inferior. Hitler preached that, so did the American military.
But today, more than 40 years later, if the Soviets rolled into Western Europe, a black American general in charge of these soldiers here in West Germany would be responsible for stopping the Soviet advance along a 400-mile stretch of border.
Lieutenant General Andrew Chambers commands 85,000 troops in West Germany.
Hey, fellas, why don't y'all come in over here a little bit?
Chambers says you won't eliminate racism by dwelling on the past.
It's young men like you throughout our Army and throughout this country that really makes the U.S. a great and proud country.
No white soldier would have heard that from a black officer in 1948 when President Truman ordered an end to segregation in the military. It was not until after the Korean War began and fresh troops were needed that real integration started.
1 month after my 21st birthday, I was rolling in on a target in Korea.
In Korea, he was the only black pilot in the Marine Corps. Today, he is the Corps' first and only black general. He had to fight for his pilot's wings then and every promotion since.
My instructor voiced the opinion that I could never be a pilot because he did not want there to ever be a black pilot, let alone a black Marine pilot.
For Peterson, Becton, and other black professional soldiers, Vietnam spurred the demand for equality. They did a disproportionate share of the fighting, but were underrepresented in command.
I felt if I ever became a lieutenant colonel back in those days, it would be a very successful career.
The Pentagon, fearful of a racial revolution and pressured by the civil rights movement, was forced to change. It did, slowly. As the all-volunteer force of the 70s took shape, overt racism gave way to veiled discrimination. Officer efficiency reports, the basis of all promotions, were often crafted with subtle phrasing which identified blacks and held them back. Black officers say sometimes the discrimination of the mid-70s was not so subtle, especially in the Marines.
There was a move amongst some senior officers to ensure there'd never be a black general in the United States Marine Corps, at least while they were on watch.
But Peterson says other senior white officers pushed him and qualified blacks in all the services past the races to positions where they enforced the rules and could watch out for younger blacks moving up through the system.
Whenever someone asked me, are things better? I say, you're talking to a guy who started all 4 decades ago. Better? Hell yes, it's better. Is it where we want to be? No, by no means.
Peterson does not believe he'll see full equality, but he counsels young blacks not to quit. Wounded in Vietnam, he could have walked away a hero, but he worked and waited for the extraordinary opportunities for blacks in uniform today. Fred Francis, NBC News, Quantico, Virginia.
In part 2 of this series tomorrow night, Fred will report on how the Navy is lagging behind on the gains for blacks in the military services. That's Nightly News for this Monday night. I'm Tom Brokaw. Gary Cutley will be here tomorrow night. I'm off to China for NBC News' week of special coverage, Changing China. I'll see you from Beijing beginning Friday night.